And good evening. Welcome to another hour of the DADS Television Network. This is our program, guys, where we get to talk about the things that are most important to us, our children. We get to talk about custody issues, visitation issues, and child support issues. We get to talk about our family. And as usual, we will probably have a few guests. We hope to get our phone lines up and running and get an opportunity for you to ask questions and call in and generally have a open conversation about our kids. A while back I had an opportunity to attend a meeting. The meeting was held in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Very beautiful place. Anybody out there that has an opportunity to visit Pittsburgh ought to do it. It's got hills, it's got mountains. Not quite like Mount Hood, but they do have hills and mountains. It's not flat country, it's hilly country. They have a very interesting downtown area. Had an opportunity to go to a place called Market Square in Pittsburgh. And if you ever have an opportunity to go there, go there. In Pittsburgh, there's a very famous institution known as Carnegie Mellon University. At our meeting, we had a guest. The guest was Dr. Peter Stearns. He's written material on fathers and fatherhood, the history, the evolution of fathers, and how they run their family in the United States or in America as it grew. We asked him to stop by our meeting and give us a little insight on the studies and on the historical notion of fathers in America. Now, I don't have the book with me. The book is sort of an academic type book. You're not going to find it at your commercial bookstores like Borders or Dalton's or even at Powell's bookstore. You won't find it there. It's not that kind of a book. It's an academic type of book. I've taken some excerpts from that and put it on our website. So if you want to read the information about fathers and the historical perspective on fathers, you might check out the DADS website. That's www.dadsusa.com. And then there is a place for you to point and click on this particular piece by Dr. Stearns, Dr. Peter Stearns. Again, it concerns itself with the historical perspective on fathers in America. That is, what fathers were defined as in the early days of this country and how that has evolved throughout the history of this country over the last 200 years plus. Now, I took some videotape of him and I want to share that with you right now. So if we're ready, crew, roll the piece on Dr. Peter Stearns. You'll like this piece. Roll tape.
The office at Carnegie Mellon with some frequency, and of course this was literally when she was a few weeks old, and of course I'd have to bottle feed her in there. And one day I was bottle feeding her, and this student who was in one of my classes, a woman, came in and looked at me and said, "Gee, it's nice to see a man doing that." And she paused and said, "But you're not doing it right." Okay, which is sort of my my personal microcosm of some of these issues. All right, first thing I should note is that there aren't a lot of works on the history of fatherhood, but there are several, and I'm not prime author of any of the more detailed works. For a while, some of us had done essays on fatherhood that would appear in volumes of the sort that Mr. Smith referred to, and some very eminent American historians did this, and the essays, I think including a few that I did, are still pretty good. But now there are several more specific books on the subject, which means, among other things, that it's capturing a little more interest and getting a little more complicated. So fundamentally, we have a general sense of modern historical framework, and I confess that's mostly what I'll be doing, but we're beginning to get a little more work. It's not a rich subject. The lack of extensive bibliography reflects, some of the uncertainties about whether this is a topic worth pursuing. But there is some stuff being done, and we're beginning to learn more, and there are some complexities, and I actually want to highlight a few of those. Okay, first point, and I obviously suffer from not knowing how much you know about historical perspective on this, or indeed how much you care. The first point is that really a good bit of the context that still affects the kinds of discussions we have about fatherhood began to develop about 150 years ago, and it's clearly associated with the development of new patterns of work, and particularly with the Industrial Revolution. Now that's a long time ago, and you may feel that this is a pretty remote reference. I will not be burdening you with great detail about every decade since then, but I need to talk about the initial change. Colonial fathers, that is, characteristic fathers before the early to mid-19th century, were in many respects viewed themselves as prime parents. Okay? They probably did not have as much to do with infants as women did, for pretty obvious reasons, but they had a great deal of interaction with children throughout their lives, assuming if they lived. They were, of course, regarded in law as the superior parent if there were any case of a custody issue, and these were quite rare in those days. Fathers had primacy. They were certainly, and this is perfectly predictable, they were viewed as the trainers of boys into men, often spent a lot of time working alongside their sons. In many cases really were the essential educators and professional trainers of boys into men. Although this was not something that was widely emphasized, they were viewed as primary economic supporters of the family, although women had an extensive role here. And perhaps most interestingly of all, among their many functions, they were viewed as prime moral authority. It was their responsibility to lead in the inculcation of moral values for both sons and daughters. This was a characteristic Protestant impulse. It does not necessarily go back forever, but in the characteristic Protestant family, men were responsible for the moral well-being of their family. They were responsible for getting them to church. They were the Bible readers. They were more often literate than women. Okay? And this was actually the aspect of fatherhood that was most emphasized.
All right. Dr. Peter Stearns, again, with the Carnegie Mellon University, is a professor with a lot of following, a lot of clout. And throughout the country now, we are rediscovering the values of fathers. In Washington, D.C., for instance, a congresswoman from the state of Connecticut, I believe her name is Nancy Johnson, has authored a bill that will have $140 million in it for fathers and some of the projects across the country. I would suggest that those of you who are interested in that kind of material, you may want to call or write to the Congresswoman Nancy Johnson from Connecticut and ask about the bill that actually right now does not have a bill number, but it does have a title. It's called the Fatherhood Counts Bill. Fatherhood Counts Bill. Now, there will be $140 million in it for various kinds of projects. I believe the federal government is now waking up to the needs and the values, the necessity of having fathers close in with their children. Well, we've been raising a fuss about that for years, and maybe the word is finally getting out. Not only have there been guys like me raising a fuss like this, but we also have learned people like this Dr. Peter Stearns from prestigious universities like Carnegie Mellon talking about fathers and fatherhood. So there's kind of a reawakening and a discovery that fathers do have a place in society. And I hope, and I'm sure you hope, that we put our money where our mouth is. That is, we start funding crisis lines for these guys. We start having shelters for these guys. We start listening to their stories, because many of them have stories to tell you that if you were to listen, I'm sure you would find very interesting. As you know, the media covers a lot of these stories, but it seems like the general media gives us basically a bad rap, where we're termed deadbeat dad or some other negative term, and we are blamed for all of the abuse in the country, and that's not true. So there are programs like this one that will try to steer you clear of that false impression that the media gives to you about what fathers are all about. Fathers are good people to have around. Every kid should have their father, and they should have their father right with them. We're going to spend this hour, hopefully we'll get our phone lines up. I need to look to the control room and the crew to find out what line we have this hour, so that you can call in with your questions. And as soon as, maybe they'll flash that number on the screen so that you'll know what number to call in on. I've got some guys here, we're going to try to get them during this hour to tell their story. Fathers who are actually going through the procedure of domestic relations. These guys are either going through divorce or dealing with the issues of visitation or child support. And perhaps you can learn from them firsthand what you need to know. And if we get those phone lines up, maybe you can ask them a question. And I'm looking to see if we got those phone lines functioning yet. And as soon as they are, we'll tell you to call in. In the meantime, okay. I've been told that we're up on 288-4442, so you can call in now on 288-4442. And perhaps you might flash that on the screen for them so they can see what number to use to call in. Again, the call-in number for this hour is 288-4442. Now, we've put out a lot of information over the years. This program has been on for about 9 years or so. And we've had guests, and we will continue to have guests. You'll see us at this hour. We're live on Friday. You'll see us here every Friday live, and we will have some Mondays live on cable channel 11. So look for us on 33 and 11, and sometimes you'll see some reruns on channel 27. I wish they were all published, but just so happens that they're not published. Now, a while back, the guys from the Seattle office who do their own program put up some information. They've got a lot of it, and so I've taken some of it out to just share with you. Now, a fellow by the name of Bob Carls runs the DADS office in Seattle. And if the control room is ready, let's roll the little piece where Bob Carls is talking about some statistics. We could go on with these statistics for about an hour, but we'll do a little talking and show you some statistics, and we'll give you a little insight with some of these academic type people who have written books. So let's roll tape on Bob Carl's piece.
You can see they're fairly interesting. This first one here, all these deadbeat dads. You know, we hear about deadbeat dads every time we turn around. And in this particular study that was done on the people that were listed with the Support Enforcement Agency as being deadbeats that were behind. This is one of the facts that was found. 51% of these fathers didn't even earn the poverty level, the federal poverty level for income. Now, another interesting fact about this is people are always talking about welfare reform, but they're never talking about including fathers in it. For example, why not just change custody to the father when a woman applies for welfare?
Okay. Well, we're okay. That's a little information that Bob had to share with you, and we've got a lot more where that comes from. As promised, one of the guys has joined us in the studio, and I want to welcome him to the studio. His name is James Brown. Can we have the camera? Hi, James. You're currently going through divorce right now, is that right? Okay. This is your first divorce. And hopefully the only one. How many kids you got? 3 and 4. How long have you been married?
Approximately 6 years.
6 years. Now, when I've talked with you before, you talked about raising the girls from, I guess, birth on up.
That's correct.
Doing everything for them.
That's right.
What have you learned about, and probably not what you wanted to learn, but what have you learned about the domestic relations system and the court system? What can you tell a father that might be going through it?
That it's probably the most one-sided fight, not in favor of the father,
Okay.
that I've ever been involved in.
When's the last time you've seen your kids?
It's been approximately 3 months.
Why is that?
Because my wife decided that she would just take him and hide him out from me.
Isn't there a law against that?
Supposedly possession's 9/10 of the law is what I'm finding out.
Okay. And now we're going to probably have you talk more about this, but initially, is there anything that I haven't asked or that you would like to say to the general public about domestic relations and what you found as a father going through domestic relations in Multnomah County?
Well, being the primary care provider and nurturing parent of these 2 girls, I found out that it doesn't seem to have that much of a bearing on who has custody at this point.
Okay. Have you been ordered to pay child support by chance?
No, it's going to be in the dissolution.
I see. All right. Maybe you can think of a question that you have. If you do think of a question you want to call in, I'm told that the number will not appear on the screen. We've got a technical structure that will not allow that, so you'll have to remember. The number is 288-4442. 288-4442. If you have a question for me or if you have a question for our guest, James Brown. This is an opportunity for those of you who are involved in the system to perhaps learn something. Hopefully, we can share some bit of information with you. Again, 288-4442. Is that correct? Okay, all right. Couple of things you should know, you guys out there. 1, do not call the Office of Support Enforcement, whether it's the DA's office or the state office under the Attorney General. Do not call them and ask about your visitation. Do not call them and complain about being denied visitation. It does no good. Their job is to collect your money. Repeat, their job is to collect your money, the child support. Their job is not to deal with the issues of denial of visitation or if she should happen to move out and go somewhere else. That is not their job. So please don't call them with that question. That's about the dumbest move that you can make. You're going to get a recording in the first place. They don't have time to fool with you in the second place, and they are not interested in your denial of visitation. Please do not call the DA's office for that purpose. It's a waste of time, a waste of taxpayers' dollars and your